In this video, we're going to add synchronization for some more UI interactions. As part of the previous video, we added a synchronize method for clicking a web element. Right now, let's focus on send keys. So let's move into page base and let's add a method for synchronizing the send keys method. So let's add a new method, protected void send keys, and here we can pass the by object for locating the element, and then we need a WebDriver wait object, right? So let's create a WebDriver wait object, new WebDriver wait, and then we're gonna pass the driver as the first parameter to the constructor, and the second parameter is the duration. So let's say duration dot of then dot seconds, and here we can pass timeout. All right, and then once we get the WebDriver wait object, then we have to wait. So there is an until method. So using this driver object, I'm going to invoke the until method. So we can specify expected conditions and inside that, and then we can say some conditions. So we have to wait for the element to be ready for accepting the characters, right? Because we're going to type something into that. So what will be the condition that we're going to wait for? We can wait for the element to be clickable. So the same condition, okay, that should be fine. So we can say element to be clickable, and then we can pass by object into this, and then we get the element object, right, the web element object, and then with the same web element object we can invoke send keys method, and here you can pass the whatever keys that you wanna add. So you need the keys, right? So you have to pass the string as well here. So let's have a second argument here, string, and the key combination, right? That's key sequence. So whatever that you wanna type on the element, and we can send the keys like this. All right. So here, take a look at the style of coding in this send keys method. There's a difference from that of the click method, right? In the case of click method, in each line of code, so we are creating an object variable. So for example, in the case of WebDriver wait, okay, so we are creating an object of WebDriver and we are assigning it to an object variable here, right? In the next line, as part of invoking this until method, we get an object of web element, right? And then we are assigning it, we are keeping it in an object variable so that we will be able to use it later, right? And using that object variable, we are invoking the click method, right? But in this method send keys, we changed the style of coding. So what we did, we created an object of WebDriver wait here, right? And we don't save it in an object variable, okay? And instead of that, what we do is immediately after creating this object, that is immediately after instantiating it, we invoke the until method using the same object. So we are not saving it, we are not keeping the object into a variable, but immediately we are invoking the object method until. And then as part of until method, that returns an object of web element, and using that object we are immediately invoking send keys method. So that's a chained way of invoking different methods. So when we get an object as a return of a particular method, using that we invoke another method, and that returns another object, and using that object we are invoking its method. So that's the chaining way of invoking different methods. Now I'm going to make one more optimization in the code here, okay, because I don't want to write duration dot of seconds in all of these methods. Let us see what is returned by this method. So this method duration dot of seconds, it returns a duration object. You can see that it returns a duration object from the documentation. Fine. So we can change this to duration. I'm going to change the type of int to duration, and what I'm going to do is, instead of writing it like this, let me cut this, and I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to create a duration object here. The timeout is a duration object now, and we will be able to use duration directly here. Okay, that is the timeout. All right, and here also we can optimize it, and we can replace the long function call into timeout. All right, so now it's a shorter method, it's more readable, right? Now let's add one more method. Suppose you want to get the text of an element from the screen, so we can add a method for that one as well. So let's write a method, protected get text, and for getting the text you need the locator, right? So it's by, and then okay, so we have to provide the return type. It's going to be string, right? Because we are getting the text. All right, so we need to have the string returned by this method. So let's return the string type as part of this. So we definitely need the WebDriver wait object. So let's create new WebDriver wait, and then as part of this we need to pass the driver because it's a constructor, right? And we have to provide the timeout value, timeout. All right, and using this we have to wait. So until, then we have to specify the condition, right? The expected condition object, and dot. So how will we wait for that? So let's wait till the visibility of the element. So let's choose a method, visibility of the element located, and then you can specify by there. So until the element is visible, it will wait. All right, and then in the next line, once we get the web element object, we can invoke get text. All right, so now you can take a look at it. We are creating a WebDriver wait object first, and using that object we are invoking until method, and we are specifying the condition inside that method which will return the web element object, and using the web element object we are invoking get text method, and this will return the string, right? Because it's a text. This get text of method will return a string. So the entire statement will be replaced by that string, and then the statement will become like, return that particular string, and that string will be returned by this method. All right, now let's implement one more method. Suppose you need to check if a particular text is present on the screen or not. Okay, so that could be useful in some situations, so we can implement that one as well. Okay, so let's start with protected. So we need to know whether a particular string is present or not. So it will be like, yes or no, right? So that is, it should be Boolean, true or false, right? So the return type is going to be Boolean, and then we can name the method like, is text present. All right, and we have to pass the text, that is a string, okay, that we have to search for, right? So let's have a variable for that. All right, so what we are passing is a string, and we need to return whether a Boolean value which will represent, whether the string is present or not, right? So a true or false will be the return value. So let's define a variable Boolean. Let's name it as maybe %, and by default let's give the value true. Now we need to look for a web element object, right? So we need to have a locator for searching for something on the UI, right? So let us create a locator here. So what are we going to do is, let's create a by object first, and then using that, let's create an XPath for that, for this particular string. Okay, so we learned that we can search for a particular string using XPath. So what should be the XPath? / let the node be anything, and then we can use the function text of. right, using text of, then we can specify the text. Okay, so here we'll be writing the text. So how do we specify the text? So this is a string, so we need to so we have to do a string manipulation, right? And the text has to be mentioned in single quotes, right? This is how the XPath is. So now we need to specify the text within the single quotes. So the text has to be specified by the text variable, the argument, right? So we can split the string and specify that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add two double quotes here, so that will be split, right? And let's have to plus, and then within this let's specify text here. All right, so now how will be the XPath string? Slash text of, then equals within a single quote, the value of this text will be added. It will be concatenated to the string, right? So you will get the XPath here, and you have the by object with the XPath that you need. Now we need to check whether this particular element, so this is the element that we need to look for, right? So now we need to check whether this element is available or not. So we need to wait for that. So while waiting, if we see that the element is available, then we can return true, or else we have, what will happen, it will throw an exception, a timeout exception. So in case of an exception, we can assume that the element is not available, that is the text is not available on the screen, right? So in that case, we have to catch this exception and we have to set the value of % variable as false, and we have to return it. All right, so let's have a try block here, and within this try block we can have the waiting mechanism, right? So let's have new WebDriver wait, and let's have our driver and timeout within that. And then what are we going to do is we're going to wait until, and we need to have the expected conditions here dot, then what will be the condition of waiting for this? We need to check for the visibility, right? So let's wait for the visibility of element located, and then we can specify the locator by, right? And let us end this here. So now let's see what happens. So this will just wait. Okay, so obviously this will return a web element object which we don't need. Okay, so it will wait, and in case of an exception, we need to catch it here, right? So let's have an exception argument here, exception E, and so what we'll do, if there is an exception, we will catch the exception so that our code won't be terminated, right? And within this, if there is an exception, that means the element is not present, that means this text is not present, because we made the XPath using the text, right? So if this XPath or if this element that is represented by this XPath is not present, that means the text itself is not present on the screen, right? So in that case, we will change the value of variable present to false. Okay, so otherwise, if this exception doesn't occur, then what will happen? The value won't be changed. It will become, it is the default value, which is true, and that will be returned. So after this, let us return the value of the variable %. So now take a look at this. Initially, we set the value of variable % as true. Okay, and then we will wait for the condition. Okay, so what is the condition? We will wait until this text is visible on the screen or not. So maximum wait condition, the maximum wait time is 5 seconds, because that is set over here, right? Well, now even after 5 seconds, if it's not available, what will happen? An exception will be thrown, timeout exception will be thrown, and we'll come over here and we'll change the value of % variable to false. Okay, otherwise it is true, right? And then the value of the % variable will be returned. So we'll get a yes or no, or true or false result as part of invoking this method. Now let's go back to login page and let us do the refactoring. We have to replace our old code with the new methods that we implemented, right? So here we have the send keys operation. So let us replace this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write it here. I can invoke send keys method, and I can specify the locator, that is txt email, right? So this is the locator, and I have to specify what text has to be typed. That's this one, right? Email. All right, so we can get rid of this statement. Okay, so it's become, very short, right? Send keys, then the locator, and the value to be typed on the element. All right, now let's get rid of this one as well. This is also a send keys. We have to type the password, right? So let's type send keys, and what's the locator for that? It is txt password, and what's the value to be typed? It's there in the variable password. Okay, so let's type it here, and let's get rid of this statement as well. All right, and next is clicking on the sign in button. All right, so we already have the click method implemented for that. So let's invoke click method, and the locator for the button is btn sign in. All right, so let's invoke that one as well, and let's get rid of this one too. Now let's get rid of this thread.sleep statement. We added it earlier as a dirty fix, right? Because we had a problem with this statement. Once we enter the username and password and click the sign in button, we are navigated into the home page. There, it will display the welcome message, right? But there was a delay for the welcome message to appear on the home page. So WebDriver was not waiting for that welcome message to appear. Instead, it was trying to grab the element, and it doesn't get the value. Okay, so our test will fail. So that was the reason why we added this sleep. Now we have the synchronization in place, so let us get rid of this and let us synchronize it. Okay, all right, so now here what are we gonna do is let me get rid of this line. Now we have the expected message, and I don't need this line. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write an assert statement, assert true, and here we can use the method that we added is text present. Okay, and here we can pass the text, the expected welcome message. All right, so what happens here in the assert true method? We are specifying a parameter, okay, some value. So whatever value that we specify here, it has to be true. If it is not true, this will make the test case fail. Okay, it will throw an exception. What we are giving inside this method is another method is text present. So if this text is present, this method will return true, otherwise it will return false. Okay, so in case of a failure, in case if it returns false, then let us have a meaningful message as well, so we know why the text failed, right? So here we can specify user not logged in, or login failed, or something like that. Okay, now we don't need this statement. Okay, so now I want to further simplify this method, because our initial plan was to use a same method for login with valid credentials and logging in with invalid credentials as well. Okay, so that's why we included a variable here, valid credentials. So why don't we have two different test cases? Okay, one for handling the valid credentials scenario. Let's go to login test and check it out. Okay, so let us have one test case for login scenario using valid credentials, and we can add another test case for handling login scenario with invalid credentials. We can have a set of conditions over there, because you can create different combination of invalid credentials, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that change in this method. So I'm going to rename this method first. So let's refactor and rename it. So I'm gonna change it as login with valid credentials. All right, so now for login with invalid credentials as well, you have to enter username, password and all, right? So I want to reuse that code, so I'm going to add one more method, public void login. All right, and here we can have these two parameters, that is email and password, and as part of this method we can have these steps. Okay, so we'll click the sign in link and we'll type email, password, and then we'll click the sign in button here, right? And we'll be using this method login within here. Okay, we can invoke it like this with username, that is email, and password. Okay, so this will perform the login operation here, right, by invoking this method, right? And then after the login, then we have to verify whether we got the welcome message or not, right? So for that, we have a welcome message here, right? Full name is passed over here, right? So that's going to be included in the welcome message. So let's get rid of this parameter while credential, okay, because anyway it's going to be valid. That's our assumption. So we don't need to have this if statement. Okay, let's take these two and let's align it properly here. Okay, so it's become shorter and very easy to understand. Okay, so now we need to make the corresponding change in the test class as well, right? Login test, because here while invoking the method login with valid credentials, we don't need to specify the parameter true, right? Because it's anyway we are invoking it with the valid email and password. All right, we can also change the test name, test method name, right? So let me rename it as login with valid credentials. All right, and let's execute and ensure that everything is working fine. So now let's launch the browser, started operations, entering the email and password, click the sign button, and it's verifying the welcome message. Now you can see that the test is passed, so we are good. So what we're gonna do is the feature branch that we worked on, it's synchronized. So let's commit our changes and push it. Let's from this menu, git menu, let's select commit. Okay, so here you can see the changes that we made. So we made the changes in login page and then login tests, and also we added a new class pagebase.java. So all these are our changes. Okay, and let's give a meaningful message as well. So we can say that added synchronization, right, for tests. Okay, and then we can do both the commit and push together. So let's click commit and push, and then you can see that the files that are going to be pushed, and let's click the push button, and now we got our files committed and pushed. We can see the messages. Now let's go to GitHub, make a pull request, and merge our changes to main branch. So we are in GitHub. Let's go to our project, Selenium Study, and here let's create a pull request. So there's a button, compare and pull request. Let's click this one, and then you can see that the feature branch that we just pushed, it's selected here. Okay, synchronize. So we already have it here. If we don't have it displayed here, then we have to select it from here. Okay, from the available branches, right? So we have this one selected already, and from here there is an arrow, and we can see that the changes are to be merged from our feature branch to main. So we are all good, and let's create a pull request by clicking create pull request button, and we have the PR created, the pull request created. Now assume that somebody is reviewing that and approving it. Now let's create the merge pull request button, and we can confirm the merge. All right, now we merged it. We don't need this feature branch synchronize anymore, right? So we can delete that branch. Let's delete the branch here. All right, Now we have completed our work related to synchronization, and we will wrap up this video.